Masechet Kiddushin Daf Mem Gimel. We saw the rule en shaliach lidvad avera. If someone sends someone else and says, "Go and do the sin on my behalf," and the messenger goes and does it, the messenger is responsible. The sender is not liable. The messenger can't say, "Well, he told me to do it. It's his fault." Because we say, Divrei harav, divrei talmid, divrei mi sham'im, the messenger, he has to answer to God himself. He has to do mitzvot. So he can't blame the sender. Rather, the messenger is responsible. Good. That's a general rule. There are some exceptions, however. We saw one exception is me'ilah. If I tell someone, go and perform me'ilah for me, go and use this consecrated item, and he goes and does it, so the sender is responsible in that case. So then we wondered, why not use me'ilah as a paradigm to say that in general, yesh shaliach lidvar avera? So we saw that according to Bet Hillel, there's yet another exception, shilichut yad. If a watchman tells someone else to go and use something that he's watching, also, in that case, the sender is responsible. And so now you have two exceptions, me'ilah and shilichut yad. And since there are shnei ketubim habim ke'echad and melamdim, so that's the only two exceptions, and we uphold the general rule, en shaliach lidvar avera. Okay, that was good for Bet Hillel. Bet Shammai disagreed with the shalichut yad, and so he instead has a different exception, me'ilah also, and then tavach umachar. If a thief goes ahead and steals a sheep and either slaughters it or sells it, even if he asks a butcher to slaughter it, he is still responsible. So that's another example of yesh shaliach lidvar avera, and that's what we were up to. How do we know that in such a case the thief is responsible? Because one derivation we saw yesterday is utvacho or mechado, just like when you sell something, you're involving a third party. So too, by slaughtering, even if it's someone else that does it for me, I asked the butcher to do it. I didn't slaughter it myself. Nevertheless, if I stole it, am responsible to pay the 4 or 5 times the amount. Okay, that's one derivation. We just have two more derivations for that same law. Deber bishmel tana or lerabot et hashaliach. Deber chizkiah tana tachat lerabot et hashaliach. Another way to derive it here is from this pasuk. If someone steals shor oseh, utvacho or mechado, that's an extra word. Or over here another tachat hashor, tachat haseh. So either from the word or from the word tachat, they learn that the sender is responsible. So that's it comes to include the agent, that the one who sends the agent, meaning the thief, is responsible for slaughtering it, and the thief still has to pay. Okay, so that's how we learn that. And so now we're so far so good. Either according to Bet Hillel or according to Bet Shammai, we have two exceptions, and two exceptions cannot be a paradigm, so they both can uphold the rule, generally, en shaliach lidvar avera. Now we ask, but we know from previous daf that there is another methodology that says even if the Torah says something twice, you can use those two as a paradigm. Yeah, it's giving two examples, and both of them are a paradigm for everything else. So then you're going to use these two as a paradigm for, in general, yesh shaliach lidvar avera, but that's not the general rule. So where are you going to learn something to counter this? And the answer is galera chamana b'shchutei chutz dam yachashev la'ishahu dam shafach hu velo shiluho, from the law of someone who slaughters a consecrated animal outside of the Bet HaMikdash. You're not allowed to do that. Ish Bet Yisrael sheishchat shor kezoaz machaneh or sheishchat bechus machaneh. Lo hevi'o, you have to bring a animal to Ohel Moed and sacrifice it there. This is Vayikra. It's different from Devarim. We're talking about different time periods. Okay, the whole separate story. But the point is, if you take something that needs to be slaughtered in the Bet HaMikdash or in Ohel Moed and you slaughter it outside, Dam yechashev laish hahu. Dam shafach v'nichrat haish hahu. So the word haish hahu actually appears twice. We're going to see both of them is a limiting word to say that that person only the one who slaughtered it is liable, not the sender. So if I have this animal and I say, hey, would you do me a favor, actually be my messenger and take this and slaughter it outside the Bet HaMikdash. And the messenger goes and slaughters it, only the messenger is liable, not the sender, because en shaliach lidvar avera. So therefore, even according to the one who says two pisukim can serve as a paradigm, and so those examples, Meilan Shilchut Yad for Bet Hillel, or Meilan Tavach Machad according to Bet Shammai, would serve as exemplars that yesh shaliach avera, but this Shechut Echutz comes to counter that and teach me no, in general, and shalach lidvar avera. Ashkan gabe Shechut Echutz bechol Torah min alan de'elim Shechut Echutz. And even though that's only one example, how do we know in general? We'll use that, and Shechut Echutz will be the paradigm for everything else. Now we ask, wait, now we have two paradigms. Why did you choose Shechut Echutz to tell me en shalech lidvar avera? Why not learn from the two examples? Let's say Me'ilan Tavach Machar according to Bet Shammai. Learn from those two that yesh shalech avera. Right? Why'd you pick one over the other? And the answer is Hadar Katav Rachamanav Nichirat Ha'ishahu regarding Shechut Echutz. It says again, only that person is another limitation, and so that extra phrase comes to say that Shechut Echutz overrides the paradigm from the two examples. Because I don't need it for this particular context, since I already know that in the context of Shechut Echutz, it already says Ha'ishahu. So this extra one comes to teach me that, in general, en shaliach lidvar avera. Good. Now back to the other opinion that says you cannot learn from two paradigms. So then I don't need this pasuk from Shechut Echutz to teach me that en shalech lidvar avera. So hane hahu my darish behu. What's he going to do with the two hahus? And the answer to that is chad me'ut hashanayim she'achazim b'sakin v'shochatim v'chad hu v'lo anus hu v'lo shogeg hu v'lo mut'ayeh. That's to teach me a limitation in the law of Shechut Echutz itself. So one of the hahus is a limitation to say if two people are holding a knife together and doing shechita outside of the Bet HaMikdash, they are not liable. That's a general rule, like on Shabbat, two people carry something, right? So they're not liable if it's something that one person could do himself. So one person could do shechita, two people aren't going to be liable to do shechita if they do it together. And the other, hahu, says, only a person that does it on purpose, or at least knows what they're doing, is liable. But if they were forced, if they didn't know, if they were mistaken, right? They didn't realize that this animal was even a consecrated animal that had to be in the Bet HaMikdash, and so in all those cases they would not be liable. So that's what he does. That opinion will do with those limitations. Now according to that opinion that says two pisukim can act as a precedent, and therefore I need the hahus to teach me and shalech l'dvar, where is that opinion going to learn these important laws? And the answer is ve'idach mehu hahu, from the extra he, so we could learn double all the laws from the hu and hahu. Ve'idach hu hahu la darish. And the other opinion that doesn't need these pisukim for shalech l'dvar does not learn anything from the extra he, and therefore only uses it for this teaching that two people are not liable, and someone who does it by force or not unknowingly is not liable. Now we have a very interesting braita that's going to present a challenge. If a sender hires a hitman and says, go and kill this person on my behalf, pays him, right? Do it for me. So, hu chayav v'sholchav patur. Only the hitman, the murderer, is liable. The sender is not liable. Okay, so that fits with the general rule of en shaliach lidvar avera. However, Shammai HaZaken omer mishum Hagai HaNavi sholchav hayav shene'emar oto haragta bechereb b'nei Amon. Shammai HaZaken says that the sender is liable, and he has a very interesting proof from King David, who ordered Uriah to be sent to the front line, where he would almost definitely be killed by the enemy Ammon. And the Navi comes to King David and says, "You killed Uriah using the sword of Bnei Ammon." So even though Bnei Ammon is the messenger, King David is responsible. The Navi says, you are responsible. So therefore, Shammai learns from that a sender, the guy who hires a hitman, is the one responsible. Now we ask, "Mai ta'ameh de Shammai hazaken?" What is his reason? I know he gave a pasuk already, but we want to try to fit it in with what we said before, with the different derivations we just saw. It must be that he thinks that two examples you can learn from them to everything else, and therefore Me'ilah and Tabachu Machar, where Yesh Shalech D'Avera, that can be a paradigm for everywhere else. He does not use the pasuk from Shechutei Chutz because he doesn't learn anything from the extra he, and for that reason he thinks in general Yesh Shaliach D'Avera, and since if I hired a hitman, he is my shaliach, is acting on my behalf. So if he did it, that's as if I did the murder, and that's why I would be responsible. So that's one way to explain what Shammai says here. Or maybe, in fact, Shammai Zaken does use the pasuk of Shechutei Chutz to teach me that in general, en shalich dvar avera, and even here, really en shalich dvar avera, and the sender, King David, for example, is not technically responsible legally in a human law court. They can't bring him. You can't bring him to a human law court and says, "You murdered." I didn't do anything. I just gave an order for someone to do something. So you can't hold someone liable to murder for that. And when it says chayav here, it means chayav bidei shamayim. In fact, it was a Navi telling him you're chayav. It was not a betin. So you did from shamayim. They will decide whatever the appropriate punishment for the sender will be. Now, according to this interpretation, what are you going to do with Tanakama? Miklal Tanakama savar afilu midinei shamayim nami patur, because Tanakama said that the sender who hires a hitman is the sender is patur, so he has no liability, not even bidei shamayim. That's okay. You can just hire a hitman and you say, "Well, I didn't do anything wrong." That's impossible. Ela dina rabav dina zuta ika benayu. Rather, they were just talking about different levels. When Shammai Zaken said chayav, he means this is a very serious dinei shamayim. It's almost like murder, and therefore in Shamayim they will give him, he will be chayav. Whereas according to Tanakama, although he has liability, this is an immoral thing to do, to hire a hitman, but nevertheless it's a lower level liability. So he says patur, just relative to Hillel Hazaken. Or another explanation, maybe the King David example is an exception. This is murder is a very, very serious transgression. So in general, you could say en shalech lidbar avera, except for murder, and because here it says, so this is you're responsible, and so maybe this is an exception to the rule. But in general, he would say en shalech lidbar avera. Okay, now ve'idach. This is an important question. The Tanakama, doesn't he know the pasuk regarding King David, that he was held liable for killing Ammon, for killing Uriah, even though he didn't do himself? What are you going to do with that pasuk? And so his Tanakama can read the pasuk very differently. He says, "Behold, you are like Chereb b'nei Ammon. Ma Chereb b'nei Ammon en ata ne'enash alav, af Uriah Chiti I ata ne'enash alav." Just like you, King David, are not responsible for all the people that Ammon killed. There's a big war. Ammon killed many, many people, and even though King David is the commander in chief and he initiated the war, he's not responsible. The enemy is responsible. So too for Uriah also, King David is not responsible. So even though it says Oto haragta, but actually the Chereb b'nei Ammon comes to say you're not responsible. You did initiate a series of actions that caused Uriah to be killed, but ultimately you didn't kill him. It was the sword of Bnei Ammon, and you are not liable, just like you're not liable to other people that Bnei Ammon killed. You are not liable for Uriah. So that's a completely different reading of this pasuk than Shammai Hazaken gave. My ta'ama, now why is King David not responsible for causing the death of Uriah? Because Uriah committed treason. When King David told him, hey, go back, I want you to go home and be with your wife. Uriah refused, and he further said, my lord Yoav are encamped in the field. I should go home. He calls his master Yoav, not King David, who he's in front of. So you can't call someone the lower person my lord when you're talking to the king himself. And he also refused the King David's orders to go home. So therefore, since he committed treason, King Melech David had a right to send him to the front lines, and he didn't kill him himself. Ben Ammon killed him, and so King David is not responsible. That's the interpretation of Tanakama. Amar Rava, im timsi lomar savar Shammai kishne ketubim ke'achad melamdin vehu hahu ladarish. Rava wants to point out something, another fundamental rule. Let's say we would hold that according to Shammai, two pesukim can teach. So, and we don't use that derasha. Therefore, in general, yesh shaliach lidvar avera. Let's say that's the general rule. Even so, he would agree, modeh be'omer l'shlucho be'ol et ha'erva ve'chol et ha'cheleb shehu chayav ve'sholchav patur shelo masinu b'chol ha'torah kula ze nehene ve'ze mitchayev. Even so, even if you say yesh shaliach lidvar avera in general, Shammai would agree that if I go and tell a messenger, go and on my behalf have relations with this person who is prohibited to you, to, let's say, this a married woman, right? Go have relations with that married woman on my behalf. Or if I tell someone, go eat this forbidden food on my behalf, you'll be my messenger. Everyone would agree that in that case, en shaliach lidvar avera, and so therefore the messenger who actually does the sin is liable, and the sender is not, because you can never have a case in the whole Torah where one person has benefit, has an enjoyment, and someone else is the one that's liable. So in this case, because there's direct enjoyment to the person, to the messenger by engaging in relations or eating it, so then obviously you can't push off the liability to someone else who happened to send him. All right, now we come to a related topic also regarding shlichut itmar. Rav amar shaliach naasa ed. Deber bi shela amri en shaliach naase ed. My tama deber bi shela. So Rav says that, let's say I send a messenger to go and betroth, do Kiddushin to a woman. Let's say it's two messengers, right? Both of you go do Kiddushin with that woman on my behalf. So Rav says those messengers can themselves also be witnesses. Even though they're messengers, they can be witnesses as well. Whereas Rabbi Shela says, no, a messenger can also be a witness. Now, what's the reason for Rabbi Shela? So maybe it's because I, the sender, did not appoint him as an ayed. That's why. It doesn't matter if he's a messenger or not. The point is, I didn't tell him that he's a witness. Wait a second, you're saying in general that you have to appoint the witnesses? What if I went and I did Kiddushin to a woman and there were two people standing there? Even if I didn't tell them you are witnesses, you're going to tell me that the Kiddushin is not valid? It would be valid. And weddings today, we are careful to make sure that the husband says, you are my witnesses to the exclusion of everybody else. But if he didn't say that, there's two people standing there and they're watching it, the Kiddushin would still be valid. So that can't be the reason of Rabbi Shela to say that a messenger cannot be a witness. Ela Rav Amar. Rather, we're going to repeat the machloket with further explanation. Shalich na'aseh aed alume ka me'alimna lemilte. Rav says, yes, a messenger can be a witness. In fact, he's a strong witness. He's the best witness. Usually witnesses are just off to the side watching something. I says, yeah, I was there. I saw that. Okay, it's fine. But this guy is actually doing it. So he can say, not only was I there, there. I'm the one that gave her the ring. And so, yeah, I could be that's the best testimony. Or that's the reasoning of Rav. Rabbi Shela said, no, the messenger cannot be a witness because we have a rule that a messenger is like the sender himself. And just like the sender, if I go and tell someone, do Kiddushin on my behalf to that woman, if I was there myself, I could not be a witness to my own act. And so, therefore, the messenger who is actually representing me, is like me, cannot be a witness. Just like I can't be a witness, my messenger is in my place and also cannot be a witness. So that is a good reason for Rabbi Shela. Now we have a challenge against Rav. Metibe amar lishlosha se'u vekaddeshu li ha'isha echad shaliach u'shnaim adim dibre bet shamai. If I go and tell 3 people, I would like you to go and give Kiddushin to that woman on my behalf. Now, according to Bet Shammai, even though I said this to 3 people, what we can do is we can consider one of them to be a messenger and the other 2 can be witnesses. But evidently, I cannot have all 3 of them be both messengers and witnesses. So you see, according to Bet Shammai, en shaliach na'aseh ed. So Rav does not fit with Bet Shammai, but that's okay. We have Bet Hillel, don't we? Bet Hillel omrim kulam shiluchin hen ve'en shaliach na'aseh ed. No, Bet Hillel is even harder to fit with Rav because he says if I tell 3 people go and give Kiddushin on my behalf, then they are all messengers, and I can't separate them. Rather, none of them are witnesses because, and he says explicitly, a messenger cannot be a witness. So Rav certainly doesn't fit Bet Hillel. He doesn't fit either Bet Shammai or Bet Hillel. We finish off the question by explaining Ad kan la peligela bishlosha va bishnayim dibra kol la. The machloket between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel is only whether if you ask 3 people, can you split them up into 1 and 2, or you can't split them up and it's no good. But certainly everybody would agree if I told only 2 people, go and be my messengers and do Kiddushin, certainly they would not be able to be the witnesses as well, because according to Bet Hillel, they're not witnesses at all. And according to Bet Shammai, I can't split them up because there's only 2 people. So you can't have 2, there's no room for 1 messenger and 2 witnesses. So we see that Rav cannot be according to either Bet Hillel or Bet Shammai. So what are we going to do? Hahu da'amar ki haytana detanya Rabbi Natan omer Bet Shammai omrim shaliach ve'ayed ehad u'Bet Hillel omrim shaliach u'shnei ayedim. Rav can follow not the previous version, but this following version of the machloket between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, which is taught by Rabbi Natan. And he explains that in fact there's only 2 people, and according to Bet Shammai, I can have 1 shaliach and 1 aed, and so I can send, if I tell 2 people, go ahead and do Kiddushin on my behalf. One of them will be the messenger, and one of them will be the witness, and the one who's a messenger will also be a witness. So I can perform Kiddushin just with 2 people, one of them doubling up as shaliach and an ed, another one being an ed. So you see, according to Bet Shammai, a messenger can be a witness. And Bet Hillel says, no, in order to do this, I would need 1 messenger and another 2 people to be witnesses. I would need 3 people to do it because the messenger cannot be the witness. Anyway, the point is here that, yes, true, according to Bet Hillel, the messenger can't be a witness, but according to Bet Shammai, a messenger can be a witness. So Rav can follow Bet Shammai. Now we wonder, Rav can Bet Shammai, really? Rav is following Bet Shammai against Bet Hillel? Halacha is like Bet Hillel. So we answer Ipuch, okay, switch these around, these 2 opinions, and that way Rav will be following Bet Shammai. That's one way of answering it. Or Rav Aha bered Rava matne ipecha Rav Amar en shalech naaseh aed deber Rabbi Shela amre shaliach naaseh aed. Or you can flip the machloket of Amoraim around, and Rav is the one that says a messenger cannot be a witness, and that will be consistent with Bet Hillel as is presented here, and Bet Hillel over here. A messenger cannot be a witness, and the so that's fine. So he's following Bet Hillel always. And Rabbi Shela, he's the one that said shaliach can be a witness. In the end, we decide that a messenger can be a witness, and that would make the most sense according to the ipuch that we switched around the opinions, and therefore that could follow Bet Hillel, would be the opinion that says shaliach naaseh ayed. All right, now we have a halacha. Amar Rava, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar l'shnaim se'u v'kaddeshu li et ha'isha, hen shiluchav, hen avadav. If someone says to two people, go out and do Kiddushin for me to that woman, so those two people can be the messengers and they can also be the witnesses. Right? We're following the shaliach. Yes, naaseh ayed. And Rav Nachman adds, not only for Kiddushin, v'chen b'Kiddushin, I can ask two people, here, take this and give this, be a messenger, be messengers to deliver this get to my wife, and you should also be the witnesses. V'chen b'dinei mamonot, if I go and give two people money and say, here, I want you to be my messenger to pay back a loan to that person. They can be both the messengers, and they can also testify. In case somebody says, hey, you never paid me back, those two people can also be witnesses. Usricha. Now, why does Rav Nachman have to tell me all three? Why can't I just derive one from the other? For Kiddushin, I might have thought that for Kiddushin, the messengers can be witnesses because they are causing her to become prohibited to everybody else in the world, right? Except for the sender. But regarding Kiddushin, now they are going to make her permitted, and maybe they have some self-interest. Maybe one of them put his eyes on her and decided he wants to marry her. And so could be that they're lying, that they never actually delivered the get for whatever reason, it was lost or something, but they would go and lie because of self-interest, because one of them wants to marry her. So I might have thought that a messenger cannot be trusted as a witness in that case. So that's why he has to tell me, yes, don't worry about that, they are trusted. And if you say regarding a get that's good, that's only because a woman can't marry two men. So therefore, since only one of the witnesses could have self-interest and the other one wouldn't, so in that case, we don't have to worry that they're both lying. But in the case of monetary gain, there they could split the profits, and they could, if I give them $1,000 and say, go pay back my loan with this, they can collude and say, hey, let's split it. We'll take 500 each, and we'll lie and say we returned it, even though we didn't. So we might have thought that they're not trustworthy there, and that's why Rav Nachman has to say, even in Dinei Manot, we still trust the messengers to be witnesses. Now we ask, Mike Hasabar, what does Rav Nachman think regarding testimony in general in monetary cases? Ikasabar hamalveh habero be'adim sarich lefor'o be'adim hane nogim be'edut ninhu diamre la pera'ane amalehu per'oni. If Rav Nachman thinks that in general, someone who gives a loan with witnesses, right, there are witnesses present when he gives the loan, so then that automatically requires the borrower to pay back with witnesses there. And if he pays back without witnesses, the lender could say, oh, you never paid me back. And he says, I paid you back. He says, no, prove it. I gave you the money in front of witnesses. You have to pay back with witnesses. If Rav Nachman agrees to that, then the messengers will also be on the line. And they'll be nogim be'edut. They'll have self-interest in their testimony. Why? It's a little complex. It's because when the borrower gives the $1,000 to the two witnesses and says, here, go pay it back, we're considering that as if it was done in front of two witnesses. Let's say, for example, that there actually were two other witnesses that saw the lender. I said, here, take this $1,000 and go pay it back. Now, the two messengers, and at that point, actually become debtors. They owe them. If they don't deliver it properly, then they have to give the money back to me. So they're actually on the line. So if they go and say, oh, we did la pira'aneh, we did not repay him, but we gave you back the money. The witnesses say, right, now I know we didn't deliver the money, but we gave it back to you. So therefore we don't have to pay. I can come and say, I gave you that money in front of witnesses. So you have to bring witnesses that you paid it back. and since you don't have that, so then you have to pay me back the money. So since the witnesses wouldn't be able to get away with that, and if they were going to steal the money, they would be on the line for it, because they wouldn't be able to say that they paid back with witnesses. Therefore, those messengers cannot be trusted as witnesses themselves. They can't go and testify, yeah, we delivered the money, or we paid back, because they could gain, they have self-interest in gaining by doing that. So it can't be that Rav Nachman thinks that. Rather, Rav Nachman, who says that messengers can be witnesses, he must think that if I give money to someone with witnesses, they can pay back without witnesses, and I can't demand that they bring witnesses to prove it. He must follow that. And for that reason, if I give them money, even if I give it in front of witnesses to the messengers, I say, here, take this money and go and pay that person, so we can believe them. Why can we believe them? As amigo. Umigo diachle memad ahadrinhu la love yecholin memad perane la malve. Since if they say, oh, we took the $1,000, but we gave it back to the love, right? We never delivered it, but we gave it back to you. And they would be believed, because we follow the principle here. Even if I gave them the money in front of witnesses, they could pay back without witnesses, and they would be believed. Since they would, in any case, be believed, therefore they're also believed to say, we paid it to the malveh. We fulfilled our job and paid it there. And actually, they would have no self-interest. So that's why they can be trusted. There's no self-interest, because they could get away with lying anyway. Because they would be believed anyway to say they gave it back to me, therefore we pay it back. According to the first opinion here, though, they would not have been believed, and therefore they would have self-interest in testifying. That's be the only way they can get out of having to pay back the money. But in this case, they have another way to get out if they were lying. So therefore, there's no self-interest, and they are trusted. So must be Rav Nachman thinks that. Now that was true before a takana. Pashta takun rabanan shivateset mishta be'eh hane'adim diahebna le umishtaba malveh de la shakil le ufarat le love la malveh. But at a later point, the rabbis made a takana called shivuateset, and that means if someone denies a claim altogether, they still have to testify to the fact that, no, I paid you back. So since even though they don't have to bring witnesses, but they will still have to pay, they will still have to make a shivu'ah, therefore they do have self-interest, because they want to get out of the shivu'ah, and therefore even Rav Nachman would have to agree at that point that they would not be trusted. Now, what would happen, in fact, in such a case? Those witnesses would testify that, oh, we took the $1,000, but we gave it back to you. They would take the Shavuot Teset, and so they'd be off the hook. And then Mishtaba Malveh Delak Shakir Leleh, and then the Malveh would also make a vow that, listen, you never paid us back. The messenger never got to us. So if they testify to that, they also would be believed, and then the Loveh would have to pay again. Ufarat le Loveh la Malveh, right? Because the lender has a claim, says, I swear you never pay me back. And he can't rely on the witnesses, because they also said, well, we gave the money back to you, and they're believed. And so he would have to pay again, if in fact it was true, that even if it was true that he paid the first time, but he has no proof, so he has to pay a second time. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.